Reactive Training Systems.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to the Reactive Training Systems podcast. Today we have Coach Peter, Lucy, Coach Adam Jones, and myself, Ross Leppala. Today we're going to chat about some things that I think can be really beneficial for people, and we're going to reframe it. We're going to frame it around the idea of our key points and what we think is necessary to have a successful meet. And the first one we're going to start off with is having a plan. And that can be really beneficial. One of the things to think about for having a plan is that when you go into a meet and you have a plan and you know what your warm-ups are going to be, what your attempts are projected to be, you're going to have a lot less cognitive demand on trying to figure those things out throughout the day. So it's going to make the day a lot easier and less stressful. What do you fellas think about the need for having a plan?
Suppose is another part would be, let's just say, depending on, let's say, what kind of meet you're preparing him for. Is it like a local meet? Is this a regional meet? An international meet? Kind of laying out, eh, you might have more than one goal when it comes to a particular meet. So if it's a local meet, maybe your goal is to increase your PRs. Maybe your goal is to achieve a qualifying standard for the next tier regional or the nationals or something like this. Or maybe you're aiming to try and take a record as well. So sometimes those goals may like, of course, if you have a good meet, usually that helps feed you towards, but perhaps if you're chasing kind of PRs, but if you chase too hard, maybe that makes it harder to kind of build up a total to secure a qualifying total or something like this. So kind of prioritizing in those kind of goals of a particular meet can be an important aspect as well.
That's a real, jeez. That's a really good point, Peter. I like that idea because goals will definitely influence plans and choices that you make throughout the day, and being aware of those things can be really helpful. So you don't have any surprises and you're kind of grounded in what's important to you going into the day. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, for sure. Like, just branching off what Peter said as well, is just having those goals and have clear goals of the intention of the meet. Like, I recently got a new athlete and she's going into a meet with just wanting to have the experience and not so much about hitting PRs or anything like that. Just the experience, going out there, experiencing the meet, and then using that to set herself up for future meets.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, one of the things to highlight here about goals, and we'll not go off on a tangent about goal setting or anything like that, but I think it's important to acknowledge here in this moment that having goals for a meet doesn't always necessarily mean numbers. There's a lot more that we can have from a goal setting perspective going into a meet, to whether it be 9 for 9 or just going in to gain the experience in that moment and different things of that nature. But not all goals have to be linked to a specific number. And then Peter had another really good point as well that is a key to having a successful meet within that plan, is being flexible with that plan. I'd imagine, Peter, you've had quite a bit of experience with all your coaching at international level, how important that flexibility of the plan is. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, it's kind of paramount because let's just say, like, even at the Worlds this year, we had a very tight battle in with them over for the 66. And I think part of the keys why we were able to come on top with that is because, we had that flexibility based into the plan based on how the day was kind of fleshing out. And let's just say some things kind of popped up that would be kind of opportunities for us as well. So we didn't actually, on any of the attempts, push into what would have been his top end kind of range that we were kind of looking at that was potentially there for the day. We were able to kind of play in with those numbers that were kind of, let's say, our B selection numbers, but good numbers in, which put him in a good position for the meet. So kind of based on how the day was unfolding, we were able to kind of play it that way. And of course, those numbers would also be, let's just say, a higher percentage of being a good lift, which is very important for that as well. So kind of having that flexibility to be able to kind of see how things are emerging during the meet as it plays on kind of factors in quite a lot. And I think it allows you to take advantage of opportunities, kind of defend against potentially, pitfalls that might kind of emerge through the day as well. For example, if another lifter misses an attempt, which then that could open up a window if you get yours in. Well, now you're putting yourself into a nice kind of rosy, strong position And, for that particular one, the fact that, we'd gone 6 for 6 by the time it came through to the subtotal, that put us in a very strong position because none of the other lifters that were directly kind of in the real hunt had gone 6 for 6 by that point. So that was kind of a key point for us, kind of being in that strong position coming into our best event, which was the deadlift then.
Yeah. Fantastic. Adam, what about you? You've competed and coached at a high level. How has being flexible with your plan benefited you as a lifter, and how has it benefited your coaching approach?
Yeah, I think it's important to not be married to the plan as well. Like you can write down your attempts, your first, second, and thirds, but at the end of the day, you need to make one lift at a time. And if, say, you miss your opener, it's probably the best. Most of the time, it's the best option is to take that opener again, just to save you from bombing out. I totally agree with what Peter said. It's being flexible with attempt selection as well. Like, lifters can miss lifts as well. I've found that, competing at a high level as well is lifts can be missed like seconds. And then you come to that third deadlift and sometimes it's all or nothing. And sometimes you need to put on a little bit more than you planned. Yeah. Just being flexible with those numbers.
Definitely. I recall it was what year was that we were in Canada, Adam? You remember? Was that 2017 or 18?
2018.
2018, yeah. And LS McLean had a significant water cut to get into the 93s. I mean, LS always has a significant cut. He likes to put himself through that torture, I think. Anybody who knows LS knows that he's a super happy-go-lucky guy, always smiling, always happy, always jolly to be around. And after weigh-ins, he was just demoralized. Like, we went to his room and got the bedspreads off both of the beds in his room and wrapped him up like a burrito in the warm-up room, and he was shivering and freezing and just looked like he'd got run over by a Mack truck. And Matt Gary and I were like, man, what are we going to do? Like, is he even going to be able to lift? Like, holy crap. And, he takes his first warm up at like 70 kilos or whatever it was. And he's walking out of the rack with 70 kilos on his back and he almost falls over. And I'm like, oh shit, we're in trouble. And Matt and I started talking about what we needed to do. How far back did we need to peel the game plan? We didn't need to be flexible. We needed a full shift and change. Like what we had targeted for our thirds was no longer reasonable. What we had for our openers was no longer reasonable. We had to peel things way back. And so we didn't necessarily know how far back everything needed to go. So we just, I don't remember exactly what the change was, but we changed his opening squat pretty significantly. And I don't remember the details on where we adjusted bench or deadlift to at this time because it's been so many years now. But at the end of the day, there was a lot of flexing and changing the plan around from what was originally targeted. And at the end of the day, LS ended up going 9 for 9 to take the 93 World Championship at that meet. And that result is not possible without being flexible.
Yeah.
And like, that exists all over in the sport, whether it be at that international level or at the local level, but being able to be flexible puts you in position to build the total.
Yeah, I remember that meet too. Another one I wanted to add, and that was a good point as well, is being flexible with the conditions as well. Like you can have a platform that's completely wrecked. You can have referees that are super, super strict with the pauses, with bench in particular, certain conditions. And that can cause you to pull things back a little bit. I remember one nationals here, we had a platform that was super slippery. Like everyone was slipping on bench press. And the game day coach at the time, he suggested, well, let's pull back your opening bench, because everyone's slipping. So that's what we did. We made all 3 bench presses, and the guys that usually have the bigger bench that puts them like pretty well ahead with the subtotal, they were slipping on their second and thirds and they were missing. So yeah, just be adaptable to the conditions and be aware of it.
as well. The logistics of the meet as well could mean that you have to change the game plan based on, similar to what Adam was. We had at the Asian Championships last year, we had again the 66. As it worked out, the session that we were in, there was only 6 lifters in the session, which meant that the turnaround times on everything was going to be extremely fast. And
Yeah.
one of the things, so that in itself is going to present a challenge. So that, of course, means that maybe you got to adjust in the warm-up plan, because you have a very small window for warm-ups. And of course, between the attempts as well. So the first thing you got to look at is, when you see the layout of that, of course, not to be married by, you might be in a situation that if you were going to take 5 warm-ups, well, maybe you got to shave that into 4 to make sure that your timing's coming in so that you're ready for the meet. And that one was, we had actually over in his first squat as well, he got massive cramps for the squat. So again, then after the first one, now made the lift, but is fairly substantially impeded for the next one. So then having to navigate the plan where we just didn't timed out his second attempt so that he would have enough time to kind of recover in and get another squat in by the third attempt as well. So again, if we'd gone up very quickly after those cramps in for the second attempt, most likely that wouldn't have gone well. But by kind of burning that second one, saying, okay, we're going to buy him some time in for the next one. So those little things that pop up kind of in that moment can be very important to just be able to, sometimes you got to go a bit left field on the game plan as well, based on, how things are kind of unfolding there as well.
Yeah. Being able to go left field on stuff like that is beneficial. I had a super heavyweight at a meet one time at a national championship too. And the flight was small and it was going to be fast. And he looked at me and he was telling me as he's warming up, and he's like, I'm not going to be able to lift that fast. Like, I'm going to be wrecked at that pace. Like, I can't do all 3 attempts. And so we got weird with it. We took his opener as a warm up. We started warming up way early. We took his opener as a warm up. We changed his second to his opener and only did his second and his third. And like, that was risky for sure, but it was the adjustment we made. And it was also, like, when you think about the plan, right? Like, what's important to the lifter? What goals do you have? That plan and that adjustment, instead of taking all 3 and only doing the 2, fed into his plan and his goals for the meet. And that was the other reason why we decided to do that, was what are the goals? What's important to this lifter at this meet? And does this adjustment of the plan meet that criteria to support those goals? Yes. Okay, let's get weird.
Yep. Yeah, I can think of a few cases like that as well. Like, even with third attempt deadlifts, like you can make a couple of changes there as well. And I remember game day coaching someone in 2017 in Calgary as well. A friend of mine, he was attempting to break the sub junior world record deadlift, and there was a couple of guys battling for it as well. But I can't remember the exact number I put down, but I put it down. And I waited until very last second, just before they say bars later, I said temp change, boom. So just bought him that little bit of extra time to get his composure and have a little bit more rest to go out, and he went out and secured it. But it's even like, as you were saying, Peter, the short turnarounds with, each lift is, the third attempt change as well. You can buy that little bit of time with deadlift, depending on where you're sitting, of course.
Yeah, and sometimes if you change that order as well and you're battling for a record, it can be, of course, you want to be the last person to have the say on it as well, because if you lock in the record, but somebody else is coming after you, then maybe that record's only stood for a few seconds, so somebody else comes in. But, even making that last little change, you get that last say, but also the other chaps who are going for it now, maybe they're having, oh, I'm going now, so they might be a little bit kind of caught off guard a little bit, which could play in your favor there also. So sometimes those little jostles and those little, throw a little spanner into the works. Or even, let's just say we had a situation in Asians the year before where we're also in a even third attempt deadlifts for, trying to, well, for the total, we'll say, but again, both lifters were very close. And, a situation where I think the third deadlift, the range for that was around 320 or something like this. But, we originally put in for the third deadlift what would be the world record. Now, we were never going to attempt the world record, but, the main purpose was, it was like, we know we would have to deadlift before the guy we were trying to beat, but there's no point in letting him sit there and know exactly what he has to put on after us until the very last moment. It's going to give them a a moment to do quick math, essentially. So it's, putting yourself in a position for the lifter too, where, you're, I suppose, applying pressure to that competitor too. So he's not settled knowing. So up until, let's just say, he's literally has to put his attempt in, he's no idea what he's going to have to attempt to try and kind of win that in the third. So, those little things. And I think, your job as the coach is to try and put your lifter in the best possible position to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. Even we're talking about, say, prime time at Worlds, you've got a certain amount of lifters. Is it 10 or 12? I can't remember.
8 now, yeah.
8.
Well, prime time be 8,
yeah.
yeah.
8.
That's quick.
Like, even I was noticing with some of them, some guys or ladies would decide not to take a third, and they won't put an attempt on. They'll just say, I want to skip it. So that makes it even quicker for the other competitors. So
Yeah, just for everybody listening
which
out
is
there.
never welcome.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is what I was going to say. Anybody listening out there, make sure to always put a third attempt in. Even if you're going to
Please.
skip it, put a number in. Not
Yeah.
putting a number in is not kind to your fellow lifters. So
Yeah.
please.
It's sportsmanship. But
Yeah, and all this too flows well into the next point of having a handler, because a lot of this stuff can be pretty heavy to sit there and try and navigate and think and crunch numbers, and having a handler can be really important in that regards, if you're able to help support and facilitate a lot of those changes. And I mean, Peter, that's what you've been doing a lot at a lot of different levels, and I'm sure you can speak on how important that is for a lifter to have somebody like you in their corner when they're competing and fighting for placing.
Yeah, so it kind of allows the athlete as well to focus on that execution, which at the end of the day is what's going to bring home the results in there. And, especially in a competitive kind of event when there could be 1, 2, 3, a number of kind of other lifters that you're battling in. It's a lot of energy that can be spent, kind of trying to crunch those numbers, those scenarios. How was their attempts, the competitors' attempts looking? Were they looking good? What kind of range do they have? Like all those kind of things. And of course, it's energy and kind of that mental energy. Like, let's just say, even after you've handled a very close kind of battle like that, you're exhausted. Whereas even though you're not even lifting, so to have that kind of energy expenditure on top of the actual lifting of it can be quite taxing as well. And of course, maybe that some lifters would like to be aware of what's happening with the scoreboard. Some prefer to not know what's going on there at all. So it kind of depends on the lifter a little bit there too. But in terms of kind of knowing where they're sitting, that's one thing, but actually kind of crunching numbers and scenarios and so on and so forth, it's very valuable to be able to kind of trust somebody to be like, okay, just make sure the right attempt is on the bar for what we need in terms of the position here. So the lifter then kind of frees up their scope, we'll say, just to kind of focus on the execution and kind of staying in the zone through the meet as well.
Definitely. The first 9-for-9 meet that I ever had in my career was in the national championships in 2014. And it was really cool. It was the first meet for me that I was finally able to stop looking at the scoreboard and what other people were doing. And I was truly, genuinely, totally focused on my process of execution. And that was like, to go 9-for-9 in that meet and have that mentality and that focus was definitely a big, like, oh, this, duh, why did it take me so long to get into this space in this zone? That makes so much sense. What was I thinking? But it's definitely huge. I'm sure, Adam, you've experienced that yourself as well.
I think a benefit, a couple of benefits about having a handler. One of those, I remember 2019 Worlds. I'm going to use this example because I didn't think I had that third deadlift in me. I thought, okay, you went, no, I'm putting this down. There was no really negotiating. I think you believed that I had it in me, and you put it down, and then I secured it. I think that's a really cool thing, especially if you're not sure that if you have a lift and you've got a handler there that's willing to push you. Whereas, like, if I was putting my own numbers down, I probably would have put 10 kilos less. So that's a cool bit. But a second one is that the other way around. Peter, you were handling one of my athletes at Worlds, and unfortunately he got injured on his third squat. And that kind of threw the whole plan out and had to adapt on that day to how he was feeling, how he was recovering from a minor quad tear. So had to make some adjustments with his bench and then his deadlift. Really, he had to RDL it. So, but he got a total. But it's good to have someone there to just take care of you in case you might gamble and push too hard, or and end up hurting yourself even more. Or yeah,
And he put in a big RDL that day as well.
oh, he did. Yeah, he's actually a really great deadlifter. He's really good.
It was an interesting one because even the bench press was highly impacted by that as well. So again, the bench press became almost kind of a Larson press or a feet up bench with the feet just kind of on the floor just to be legal essentially. But then the deadlift warm-ups became just a feeling out process of, okay, what's a place that we could, being going from, he's normally a Zuma puller into essentially doing an RDL to post up a toll, but having to kind of use the warm ups just to feel out, okay, what's a range here that we could actually do that's not going to, of course, you don't want to come away from the meet, with that injury after getting multiple lead times worse or anything like this there as well. And he ended up putting in a pretty solid number in there as well. So, and still put up a very solid total as well coming out
Yeah,
of it.
he did so.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it sounds like as well, like one of those things that we talked about that's a key to a successful meet is taking it one lift at a time. And that's a lot of what's happening in a moment like that. It's just taking it one lift at a time, one allowing the moment to be what it is. Like there's things that go wrong in a meet, and whether it be the equipment and our feet sliding on bench press, or we're getting some cramps or something like that, it doesn't help us to complain about it. We have to just find the way to move forward. And I think a lot of that, the idea of taking it one lift at a time, is really beneficial to that and keeps us kind of focused forward rather than thinking about what the problem is. We're trying to find solutions to move forward with it more than anything else.
I think it's also good in the execution point is you need to go out there and hit that opener with great intention rather than I'm just going to go in and just lift this and then go to my second, lift it. Then I'll do, smash that third that I want to, really want to
Yep.
achieve rather than, okay, I got my opener. I need to go in there. I need to remember my commands. I need to execute well and then get that on the board. And then, okay, what's next?
Yep.
All right, let's focus on that.
The only lift that I've missed in my career since starting competing nationally in 2012 due to a technicality was an opening squat, and I got called for depth. And it's the only squat I've missed because of depth as well. And the reason why I missed that was because I wasn't focused on that lift. I was focused on my warm-ups went so good and I felt so amazing that I told Susie, I'm like, oh man, I feel amazing. We're going to be able to go heavier than what I planned for. And so I was thinking about how heavy am I going to be able to go today instead of the execution. And because I missed my opener, I had to retake it. And now I didn't get to find out where I was on that day because I wasn't focused on the current task, the current lift. I was focused on the future, and that is a distraction. And at the end of the day, most errors are just an expression of a distraction. How have you seen that play out, Peter?
You see that, let's say, quite often especially if you're in a kind of a tight battle there with somebody as well. Like oftentimes, if somebody does make a little technical mistake like that, it holds them back, we'll say. So and that's a very important aspect, is that, of course, having the potential to be strong enough to be in the mix, but that execution point and being able to kind of bring that in for all of the attempts. And that's often the deal shaker there as well. If somebody's got a really big squat and that's their main lift, we'll say, but then there's some technical execution misses, something like this, it's opening up the doors. Let's just say the back doors is open now for the lifters coming in against them as well. So it's one of those things. And like, let's just say we had, even at Worlds this year, of course, we had a missed opening deadlift from a grip issue that popped out, which, of course, made it a bit of a stressful situation at the time. But, it's about kind of not panicking through. At the same time, okay, if that had gone in like it normally would, we're in a very strong position. Now, when that didn't, of course, it makes our position a little bit more vulnerable here. But when you kind of look at the lay of way things are, because we still have the biggest deadlift come second round, we can still retake that in, get that guy on the board. We're still in the range position. Now, if we were in a different situation where we didn't have the bigger deadlift to come in, okay, now maybe we got to push up and kind of still take a bit of a gain in on that one as well. So it's one of those kind of ones where it's kind of about not panicking as well, kind of staying the focus, kind of, okay, where are we at now? Okay, the plan has changed. We were kind of in a very strong plain sailing kind of condition up to now, but now something very unexpected has just popped up. So it's kind of being able to kind of make that kind of on the fly adjustment through, correct the issue that was causing the issue, if it's possible, of course, and come out with the positive outcome on that.
Yeah, good stuff. Adam, how many bad meets have you had? Or maybe I'll rephrase that. How many meets have you had where your like the outcome fell short of where you wanted it to?
I think I've had more of those earlier in my career, but now since I've matured as a lifter, I don't get so focused on what I want to end the day with. More as like, I want to, do the best I can, obviously. But in the past, I'm like, I want to hit X. I want this, I want that in this meet and come short. And then I feel disappointed.
Right.
Whereas now it's not so much about that. It's about experiencing the meet, doing the best I can. If I can walk away with, potentially the win and doing well, or even if I didn't win, but I PR'd really big, I'd be super stoked. As long as I'm seeing like I'm making progress from meet to meet or every couple of meets, then I'm pretty satisfied because it's the long game.
Right. And what do you think you did that allowed you to get to that point?
It's a good question. Like, I think just thinking of where I want to be in the long term, where I want to be. And I know, and I've like looked up to lifters that have been in the game for a long time as well. And they didn't become good from just, the next meet. They've put in the hard yards, especially masters lifters. I know they've experienced patches where they haven't seen much progress, and then all of a sudden they've made progress, and then it's a bit quiet for a bit, then there's progress. I think it's just part of the process.
Yeah. Well, that's all good stuff, but you answered the question wrong.
I did.
I was hoping you were going to mention your bullet point. I was trying to guide you into that, to reflect and learn from the experiences.
Kind of did, but not really. But yeah, obviously, yeah, you want to reflect, and like each meet, you want to reflect on it, reflect where you want to improve. Even if you did well, like you can always do a little bit better. Like, what did you learn? And using that to test out in the next meet. It just gives you something to work on in the next meet. And yeah, being mindful of that.
Definitely. Peter, do you do that for coaching? Do you like reflect on the meets and be like, oh, well, I could do this better next time or that better next time, and this I did really well. Good job, self.
Yeah, I think it's important. There's always, I suppose, a little bit of a debrief process after a meet as well, where, you kind of look at how things played out, okay. And of course, the decisions that were made in terms of, let's say, how the warm-ups go, like the spreads in from first and second, and especially, let's just say, if of course we meet well, it's kind of good information on, for the future process as well, stuff that you can lean into. But let's just say if there was missed lifts, it's like, there's always going to be that question of, well, if I had put X amount, or if we had, taken a bigger jump, a smaller jump, based on how things plays out. So I think it's always useful to kind of go through that process, because it just helps you refine the process. So when similar situations kind of come in the future, you're kind of armed with that. It kind of gives you that little extra layer. So, I think equally important for good meets are meets that things might have not gone so well. And it just helps you. And it comes down to just the experience of those meets as well, because then when in the future, let's just say a situation kind of emerges in, well, you've been in a similar situation in the past, that gives you, a little bit of quick actionable stuff, because oftentimes these decisions have to go in very quickly. So you're having to kind of, don't have time in the meet so much to kind of sit and dwell on something or kind of really ponder it through. You need to be able to kind of make quick, kind of actionable kind of calls in the moment, which is very important as well. So, I think it's very useful, and it's a missed opportunity if you don't go through that process.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really important as well that I want to encourage everybody that when you do reflect on things, because look, at the end of the day, you're going to have a bad meet. What from a coaching perspective, from a lifter perspective, you're going to have a bad meet. We've all had them. I've had them as a lifter and as a coach. And I think it's important when we do reflect on those meets that we do the best we can to do it from a non-judgmental place. And what I mean by that is that we don't look at our mistakes and label ourselves as bad or something along those lines, because from my experiences, that tends to incite like some shame and guilt about who we are. And that then in turn blocks us from being able to learn from the experience. And I think when we are able to shift away from it and just look at it as like, I made a mistake. That did not work out. That choice was incorrect. What can I do differently should that same scenario come up again in the future to contribute to a different outcome? And I'm able to learn what I need to learn a lot more from that and integrate that learning lesson moving forward with more ease. And like, I don't believe that we need to be so brutal on ourselves, because those mistakes are, quite honestly, they're going to happen. I mean, that Vancouver meet, when I made that mistake handling you on your third deadlift, I read the scoreboard wrong and I put Adam's third deadlift in, thinking that was going to put him in on the third place for the podium finish. And all it did was actually tie the person who was in third place. And I didn't realize it till after Adam pulled it and he made it and was successful and thought he pulled for a third place deadlift when he didn't. And I was absolutely gutted. That's probably my absolute least favorite coaching memory of my career. I can't think of a coaching moment that I hate more than that I'm more displeased with than that. But it was also came with a lot of really good learning opportunities for me. And I am a lot more skilled at reading the scoreboard in totality as a result of that, because that forced me to realize like, hey, I have to slow down and read all the damn information on the scoreboard. It's important. Lot number, body weight, everything. And as a result, since that time, I haven't made any of those same errors.
Yeah, that meet was still one of my favorite meets. I still was quite happy with the result. But, like as we were saying, reflect and then move on and learn. I think that's how you become better over time, as you said. And like just recently, our nationals, I missed weight. I didn't get the lift at all. I spent quite a bit of money going there as well. But I personally feel like that's one of the best lessons I had to learn as an athlete. Yeah, it really sucked, but I feel like I'm a much better lifter going through that. From that day, I've been managing my body weight, and I've been under the weight class for the last, I don't know, few months, and my training weight is under the weight class, and I'm having some of the best training I've ever had in a very long time. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, you're going to have your bad patches, but use that as an opportunity to make it better.
Yeah. And if you don't like reflect and learn, then you'll end up making that mistake multiple times like me. And I missed weight at the Arnold Sports Festival multiple years in a row and had to lift as a guest lifter, and my total didn't count towards anything. Oh man. Sometimes smart people do stupid things, and that's
Oh.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We're only human after all,
Yep. Absolutely.
not robots.
Yep. And we're going to wrap it up and end on probably what I think is a really important key to success on a meet, and understand that your E1 or M is a tool not your target third. I think that gets a lot of people who use estimated 1RMs in a lot of trouble when they start going into a meet, because people see that number and oftentimes get attached to that number as their third attempt, and it is not the same. You can use your E1RM as a tool to guide you towards a third attempt and a goal and a target. However, they need to be different, and we need to understand that. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's a tool to gauge if you're making progress in training, because, RPE is subjective to how it feels to you. And, depending on how off you are, like, your E1RMs could be lower, but most of the time they're probably higher than expected. And yeah, try not to get married to that E1RM number, especially for a third attempt, because you could take a second attempt and go, I probably only have 10 kilos left instead of 20. And then, you put that 20 on, and it's probably way too much, where you could have made a better choice of going with your intuition of how it felt to you and how many kilos you felt like you had in the tank. But yeah, so, like, how often have you guys experienced with your athletes that their E1RM was lower than their thirds? Like, obviously, you probably see that on your deadlift when they probably have to, take a bit of a gamble. But have you seen that at all?
Rarely.
Rarely. It would be rare,
Like
but it'd be
usually,
surprising.
it'll be rare. It can pop up sometimes, but for the most part, it's kind of, it might be a little bit less than this. It's kind of, there's so many other factors coming in on the day there as well. And of course, what you're benchmarking those E1RMs on is another factor as well. In the sense that, let's just say, even from my own training, let's just say if I'm doing like sets of 5 and 6, my ERM gets quite high, but I know for a fact that's not realistic to what I can actually kind of do in on a single. And, so it's, whereas it tends to trend better in those places than how it would materialize down in. So let's just say, just kind of not getting married in on that as well. And at the end of the day, the most relevant lift to where you want to go from your first, second to third is the lift that just happened. And for the opener as well, the most relevant lift is not what you kind of did last week in training or what you did there. It's like, how did your last warm up move? Did that move the way it should? And that's why it's always good practice as well, just to make sure, like, let's just say that you get that last warm up in before that change deadline. Even if it's a big flight, it's usually a good idea just so that you have that opportunity to just know that, oh, that's moving the way it should, and, of course, then you might have a situation if it's a long flight, you're towards the end of the flight, there's quite a bit of time, but, it is a good practice to be able to just get that in. So you kind of have that check and balance essentially in for the opener, and then kind of using that as the main information that comes in towards your next attempt.
Yeah, definitely. That's all really good stuff. And I would say the vast majority of the people that I've worked with, their actual 1RM going into a meet or after a meet is usually a little less than the E1RM. I think the people that I tend to see the E1RM lower than what their actual output in a meet is are usually people who are a little less experienced with RPE, and as a result, they tend to be a bit conservative in their training, and then they go into a meet and they have the opportunity to push themselves without the worry, I guess, for lack of a better word. And they come to find out that they're stronger than what they had been thinking. And then they come back to their training and now they have a new calibration of what their capabilities are. And then their E1RMs become a bit more accurate than what they were prior.
Absolutely.
I tend to think that for the most part, most E1RMs are a little bit higher than what the actual 1RMs are, mostly because there are things in a meet that impact us and impact our ability to display our strength that we didn't have in training. We are cutting weight. We have an anxiousness and excitement about us that not everybody knows how to channel in a positive direction. And then that becomes distractionary. Your pauses on your bench press are usually to a higher standard in the meet than they are in training. I know my pauses in training could probably be a little bit more strict but I usually pretty good at accounting for that in my game planning for a meet. So I tend to not worry about it as much. and you have all those other environmental considerations that we've talked about too. Is the carpet slipping? Maybe you don't have that consideration in your E1RM. So there's a lot of other things that go into that. The other thing that I think about too is, let's say your E1RM is accurate, and that is 100% of what your capacity and capability is. In order for you to actually move 100%, you have to nail it. You have to freaking nail it. And little mistakes cost you at that range significantly. And that can be a massive difference. So when we think about it, a lot of times, like I've had, man, I can't remember off the top of my head, but that raw national squat that I had in 2023, like that was the truest 10 I've ever had in my life. And for anybody that hasn't seen it, I stopped like 3 different times in my mind. I felt like I stopped 3 different times and then started moving again. It was the grindiest grind of my life. And had any other little thing went wrong in that lift from a position or technique wise, there's no way I would have overcome those things. But that lift I nailed perfectly. Like that. Wow. It was so much fun. And like, that's one of the things I think that we're after, is that level of effort on a lift in a third. But again, little mistakes add up at that point. And we're not always going to get that right.
Yeah. I probably experienced once where my E1RM was exactly the third attempt.
Oh yeah.
That was 2019 in Sweden, that third attempt deadlift.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And as you said, put everything into that lift, no room for mistakes. My good friend JJ in Singapore, he used to always remind me, like, I used to overthink my deadlift. I need to do this, I need to do that. But he just goes, just stop thinking and just pull it. And like, get amped up and just pull it. And usually that works for me. Stop overthinking it. Just grab it and go. So, yeah.
I got to approach deadlift the same way. Like, I think a lot for squat. Well, not so much squat, but I think a lot with bench press. And deadlift, I have to not think. I have to just shut up and pull. Because otherwise I start thinking not productive thoughts for deadlift, because deadlift has been a frustrating lift for me at times. Yeah. And the thoughts will become unproductive.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to circle back to the E1RMs, and it's kind of off meat topic, but like how E1RM is just a tool. Like, yeah, it might fluctuate in the numbers, as Peter said. Like, if you're doing high rep stuff, you're going to get higher E1RMs compared to lower rep stuff. But the way I like to use it, especially writing training for my athletes, is that you want to see the rate of gain. Like, you want to see, how productive is that rep range, and put it into context, and don't be married to the actual number that it's producing. Whereas when you're writing the blocks out, yeah, you can have a mixture of having some of that low rep range with that higher rep range where it could be productive for the athlete. So it's important to track all that and be mindful of, how it's reacting, rather than as I said, the actual number.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the biggest emphasis on that too, again, is just that you got to think about it as a tool, and every tool gets used a little bit differently and has different contexts. So just being mindful of those things so that you can use it in the appropriate way. You don't use, not all hammers are the same. They're not all equal. Some are shaped differently than others, and they're used in different situations. So we have to be mindful of this tool and its shape and how it's used and utilized. Awesome. Any closing comments, encouragement for anybody listening from you guys?
Just make lifts.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's kind of use the experience, put together a good plan, be flexible in the plan, and just use that experience to kind of feed the future plan. And of course, the future kind of training and preparation. And, every meet presents kind of an opportunity in that regard as well. So kind of treating it as an opportunity to just keep building your, like I said, building through your career there as well, in the development, where, we've all had the kind of early meat experience and how that trends through and kind of feeds into your kind of experience and your kind of outcomes with the meats as you kind of keep going down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good stuff, gentlemen. And the closing statement I got for everybody is, we talk at RTS a lot about building momentum. And like that's a lot of what this is. Like building momentum is drawing from the experience to learn from it and elevate your knowledge and skill set based on the experience. Whether that experience is necessarily positive or negative doesn't matter. Like we're going to experience the full range of it. That's part of being human, and that's okay. But we build momentum from learning from the experience, no matter what it is. So I'll leave it at that. Gentlemen, thanks for chatting with me today. Those of you listening, thanks for tuning
Likewise.
in to RTS today. Have a fantastic day.